was going to get my Jerusalem Marathon medal.
Okay. You're almost like Ori Sasson with all your medals.
Oh, yeah, whatever. I've got a few of them. I've got more. Everybody gets a trophy in America, you know.
Did I tell you 2 years ago my car got broken into in Miami, and all my medals that I used to bring around to show people were stolen?
Oh, well, it's not here. Where is it?
I don't know.
Don't forget that, man. Sorry.
I have about 500 Run for Zion medals sitting in Chicago for the last year and a half. All right.
I love it. Well, I love running for Zion, and I can't wait to talk about it with people.
We're going to do it. So I'm going to count backwards from 3, and then I'm going to do my general intro and then introduce you. Want to make sure I have my papers all in the correct order. Yes, I'm good. Okay, ready?
Okay.
3, 2, and 1. Shalom. Welcome to another episode of Inspiration from Zion. I'm Jonathan Feldstein, and I have the privilege of being your host, coming to you from the Judean Mountains here in Israel. I like to think of it as the original Bible Belt. Inspiration from Zion is a program of the Genesis 1-2-3 Foundation, whose mission is to build bridges between Jews and Christians with Israel in ways that are new, unique, and meaningful. And I pray that you will find this all of those. Through this program, we are excited to be connecting you to people in and stories about Israel to give you a window to look through about aspects of life here in Israel that you might not otherwise know about. We want this to be interactive, so please be in touch with us at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com and send along any questions and comments anytime about any topic. Or you can connect with us at genesis123.co. Also, please feel free to share this with people who you know who will also find it of interest. Today, I am really, really thrilled and excited to introduce a special guest who's a good friend. We're going to talk about a topic that he was in on from the ground floor, so to speak. I want to introduce Pastor Ray Hardee. Ray is actually the best thing about Ray is that he gets to be here with us, and we get to have him here as well. He's married to He's married to his college sweetheart of 37 years. They have 3 grown children, and more importantly, he has 3 grandchildren. Pastor Ray is the founding lead pastor and cultural architect of the Point Church in Belmont, North Carolina, where he served and led for the last 20 years after having served at Gardner-Webb University for 15 years as Dean of Admissions and Enrollment Management. He also is an adjunct professor of human services at GWU, and he's not just a pretty face, but a very sharp mind. He holds degrees in pre-law, counseling, and has done additional studies at GWU School of Divinity, Regent Park College of Oxford University, with Southeastern and Southwestern seminaries. That was
some people would call them that.
Okay, well, I'm not going there. That's another conversation. Southeastern and Southwestern seminaries, and a master's degree in liberal arts with a concentration in religion and social justice from Harvard University. And he's now working toward a PhD in leadership at Anderson University. Pastor Ray has also written a book, 10 to Win, and authored numerous columns regularly for local North Carolina media. He's a competitive runner and most recently finished the Jerusalem Marathon and the Medtronic Marathon. He's also an advocate for Compassion International, World Vision, and Run for Zion, which is a project of the Genesis 1-2-3 Foundation, where we are privileged to have him serve as an advisory board member. I got to know Pastor Ray because of his faith, his leadership, and his running, so it was a natural fit for him to join Run for Zion, the first ever Christian program around the Jerusalem Marathon. He's become a great friend and a trusted advisor, and it's a real blessing to welcome him here to the Inspiration from Zion podcast today. Welcome, Pastor Ray.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. What a great introduction. It was just the way I wrote it. That was really good.
Hey, I tweaked it a little bit.
I like that. I like the sharp mind part. There might be people that disagree with you about that, but anyway, and pretty
No, but
face.
it's true. I was impressed when we were working together on that project. You were asking my help on one of the projects you were doing at Harvard. And to me, anyone who has any academic connection to Harvard is not a dull pencil.
Well, I appreciate that. And that was a fascinating class. It was about the Holocaust, all the causes and various things related to that. And I did my senior paper in that class, particularly related to evangelicals, the Shoah, and the foundation of the nation of Israel, and who was involved in the evangelical world and trying to help that from happening, not the foundation of Israel, but the Holocaust, and then also how we helped, or people that I would identify with as evangelicals helped to make it possible. So part of the reason that my heart and my mind is so much on Israel is because my father went to Israel 55 times as a tour host. And I actually got a presentation for the nation of Israel for being such a wonderful businessman and stuff like that. But also because of this whole opportunity to get to know you and your work and trying to bring together Christians and people that are evangelicals and various Christians of different stripes to help the Jewish people, God's chosen people in Israel. Well,
I actually, regarding your studies at Harvard, it's real interesting. And it wasn't just important for you and the project that you did, but both for yourself, but it was also, I remember you sharing with me how you shared elements of your project with others. So it wasn't just a self-learn, you were also educating others. And especially as we are in the generation now where the last Holocaust survivors are living, it's all the more important that we know about that. But actually, I did want to jump off, and I'm glad you mentioned your father. I didn't remember how many times that he had been here, but your first trip was with him. How is it? And the whole, maybe it's a kind of a superfluous title to refer to you and others as Christian Zionists, because well before that that title was thrown around as frequently as it is today, your father was one of those leaders. Your father, it was a pastor, correct? Tell me and everyone who's listening about him and why Israel was so important to him and how that rubbed off on you.
So God's given me the gift in life, but also some of the pain in life. I lost my father, my biological father, when I was 8 years old. He was a Christian minister as well, but he died in a plane crash with my brother when I was 8. And so 3 years later, my mom met and married my dad, number 2, and his name was Thurman Stone. And so one of the things that was always preeminent in our home is not just because he was going to Israel and taking trips to Israel, but the constant mentioning of it in his preaching and his teaching about how God's eyes are on the nation of Israel and how really everything in civilization, as God would define civilization, begins in Israel. I think it's also fascinating. Over the years, I kind of stretched out a world map, one of those world maps you stretch out. Well, if you put your finger on Israel, it's almost in the dead center of the stretched out world map. It's almost like my father, and I call him Dad number 3, my second father. He really showed us the importance of making sure that Christians have their eyes on the nation of Israel, and they're taking their time and their talents and their treasures to help the people that were Jewish too. I would also say he was very balanced in terms of, well, he loved people. I mean, the guide for us when we went to Israel was a Palestinian named Muhammad. But Muhammad had great respect for my father. And then also my father had great respect for the Jewish people because of what the Bible teaches us about the fact that God does love people, the stranger in our midst as well, but specifically the core of civilization comes from Israel.
Correct.
It's the way that I would look at it.
Correct. And as you know it, and as I know it, and millions of others today know it, and obviously your father knew it, that without Israel and Judaism, there would be no Christianity. And so what was it like? If you remember correctly, you were 12 years old when you came here the first time? What was that like, coming here as a 12-year-old, experiencing for the first time the land where Jesus walked? It was amazing. We did it after Christmas. And it was a great experience I think we're here 10 to 12, here, there. I feel like I'm in Israel when I'm with you.
for 10 to 12 days. And it was cold, but we got to just experience the beauty and the variety of Israel, from coast to Jerusalem down to the Dead Sea, up into Galilee, various places like that. And even as a child, I knew enough about the Bible and Old Testament stories from Tanakh, but also New Testament stories to begin to say, oh, that's where that happened. And the great thing about it is I've grown in my faith over the last decade since then, is that, that's decades plural, by the way, many of them, is that
as long as you're growing.
That's right. Still growing. That's exactly right. If you're not growing, you're dying. I definitely believe that's true. But I was able to identify with that site. I mean,
yes.
The most beautiful place to me, and the most beautiful thing that I have ever seen, in terms of all the sights and sounds of life, was the Sea of Galilee. Just the beauty of it, the way where it's placed and that kind of stuff. And it just really is extraordinary. And I imagine Jesus walking on the water. I imagined people listening to his teaching on the Sermon on the Mount by the Son of the Mount. I imagine Pharisees and Sadducees and teachers of the law giving him a hard time, and then some of them following him and some not following him. But just the whole experience was extraordinary and opened my eyes. We worshiped at the Garden Tomb on that Sunday that we were in Israel, so that was very meaningful. It was very cold. I remember thinking, okay, been there, done that, got a t-shirt, say amen, we need to go back and get in the heat, But that was very meaningful to me, obviously, to be there. And I know there's stress about, was it really there in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre? And but the fact that I got a chance to get that initial interaction was really powerful. Right. And I go back to that and refer back to it.
So I remember who introduced us, a Facebook friend of mine and a member at your church. And I was just sharing, as I do, because I'm always connecting with Christians, social, in person, social media, whatever we need to do. And he said, well, you need to talk to my pastor. Now, I guess, I don't even know if he told me that you were a runner at the time, but and I mean this is not rhetoric. I'm never going to forget much about you, but our very first visit, I remember coming to Charlotte, driving to the church. It was a hot day out. I could still draw, you drew pictures in your Harvard class that you shared with me about, actually in Jerusalem. I could draw a picture right now of the room in which we were sitting, the layout of the church, and where you and I were sitting across from one another, and the special gift that I brought you. Do you remember the gift that I brought you?
Oh gosh, you brought me some honey, I believe.
Date honey.
And that's right. That was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I always thought, which is the biblical honey, but that'll be just a teaser for another conversation about why date honey is the real biblical honey. So I
love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's wonderful. I put it on my yogurt and stuff all the time. Bake with it, cook. But we're not. This is not a course on culinary things yet. We're going to talk about Israel and Run for Zion. But when I came to you, you were obviously with that foundation, and of course, then being who you are and growing as an individual and as a pastor all these decades, you were really receptive and immediately excited about the idea of running in Jerusalem. You saw that this concept of Run for Zion, which we put together as the very first Christian experience around the Jerusalem Marathon, was something that was special. I don't know if you can actually fairly replay that before you came here and actually did the run, but why is the idea of running in Jerusalem? Forget the experience of doing it. Why was the idea so special?
Well, very much it was a pilgrimage. My father would take people to the Holy Land. It was not like, we're going to take you to the Holy Land, we're going to make a certain amount of money, we're going to leave this day and be back that day. It was called a pilgrimage. And so by going and putting my feet on Jewish soil, on Israeli soil, essentially helped me understand God's great plan for humankind. And so to find out that I could set feet into Israel again and to do something that I enjoy doing. I enjoy it most when I start, and I enjoy it most after I finish, but I enjoy the endurance part of it is important to me too. So several things come to mind that made this interesting and intriguing to me. Okay. First is that I was given the opportunity to run for a missional cause. I run for World Vision. and have done various things to raise money for what World Vision does and for Compassion International. But also, this gave me an opportunity to think, well, I get to help people that are part of the nation of Israel and help in various fashions. We can help soldiers that are part of the it's called the Israeli Defense Force, the idea. We can help people that are homeless and that are at a soup kitchen. And so we got a chance to go to Mayor Panin. That I can go to experience some of culture that I did not experience as a child and would not have had enough context to appreciate it, like the Friends of Zion Museum and like the Holocaust Museum. It was just a broadening of that experience. So I look forward to those kinds of things that were touristy, but for me, the experience of being there and putting my feet to the pavement to help to serve people that are in Zion was the most important thing to me, because I wanted to make a difference with them. Obviously, there's the cool factor. I mean, when we talk about the run in a few minutes, I'll tell those people that enjoy running, the Jerusalem Marathon is like no other race I've ever been a part of because of lots of different reasons. But ultimately, I have this phrase that I've heard in life, and I think John Maxwell said it first, or maybe he ripped it off from somebody else. I don't know, but it's really become a mantra for me in almost everything that I do, that crosses all kinds of different lines: secular lines, religious lines, civic lines, business lines, all those kinds of things. And here's the phrase. I'll do it in my best John Maxwell voice.
Okay.
I want to make a difference with people who want to make a difference, doing something that makes a difference at a time that makes a difference.
Wow. I got to remember that. I
just think it's a great statement, because it for me, it's kind of like, I want to make a difference. So if I'm running, I mean, I've got this whole shelf of medals back here in the background of things and I like keeping them as mementos and that kind of thing, of accomplishments. But what can I do as an experience to help somebody else because I am doing that experience? Right. That makes all the difference in the world to me. I'm competitive and I like to win and I like to do all those kinds of things. But to know that I could be the first person, didn't know it at the time, that would cross the finish line in the Jerusalem Marathon for Run for Zion, was just an incredibly, that's more meaningful to me than medals or whatever, because I got a chance to do something that was unique for the people of God, in the place of God, and in a way that was honorable to God across all religious spectrums.
Right. So let's talk about, I want to talk about your running experience there. And I'm going to have a lot of non-runners listening, I'm sure, and want to relate to them, because the Run for Zion experience isn't only for runners. And we'll talk about that. But I'm so glad that you brought up doing things for others, because one of the things that I'm most excited about with Run for Zion, by the way, people can go visit, of course, Genesis123.co, but there's also the website runforzion.com, which we're revising, and we're going to talk about why that's being revised during this conversation. But one of the great models of Run for Zion, and I may have even said this almost in these words when we first met, is that it's very biblical, because you can make a choice. You can come and pay your own way and have a meaningful participation and experience. But I'm always in awe, not just of the fact that in Genesis 12:3, God says what he does, but God doesn't say, bless Israel, I'm the Lord your God. He says, bless Israel, and I'm going to bless you. That's a formula. My father was a chemist. And so I always think of life through formulas, and that's a relationship. And that means that even if we're not looking for it, God's promising, even if we're not looking for it, that somehow by blessing Israel, he's going to bless us or continue to bless us. So we gave people like you the opportunity to raise money for a basket of projects, and you mentioned some of them. One of the other experiences we had was having that meeting with the organization here that's works to protect unborn babies. And there were a few others. We had a really great hands-on experience, and that's what we do. But I love the fact that picking up that biblical formula of blessing Israel and being blessed, we also have a model where based on how much money somebody raises, they can earn subsidies up until a free trip. And you got some very generous people who stepped up behind you and sponsored you. And And I think it's fair to say you didn't have to pay out of pocket, but you came away with so much that because of all we were doing, and it wasn't just words about, oh, we're giving money to these people and these people, you actually saw it. We hands-on, we did volunteer work, we had briefings, and that was amazing. What were it may jump ahead as far as a little bit, but when we were in Israel, running around the Jerusalem area, seeing these things, there's a great video with you on our website. What were the couple of things that really jumped out that said, hey, wow, I'm part of that. I did that.
Well, ultimately, somebody's trying to call me. I'm going to have to tell them I'll call them later. All right, we're back in business here. Okay. So first of all, the concept of making this race a mission trip was really what I looked at this as being, through the lens of being a running missionary, to learn and to grow in the depth of my faith and its application, so I could share it with other people. And it did that in a way that was like no other. Because Israel is Middle Eastern, but it is also very Western in part of its orientation, the idea that there are still populations of people that are desperately in need in Israel, and going to Meir Panim and seeing those people and talking to people that were like that, and finding that by supporting that, we weren't just supporting people that were Jewish, but people that were Islamic, people that were Christians, people that were Greek. Nobody's turned down at the door for a meal because of what their ethnicity or their faith happened to be. I mean, that was powerful there. Going to the Friends of Zion Museum and seeing the expanse of the big plan of what it was like for people that have been Zionists over time, biblically all the way into modern times, in the place where it happened, with that beautiful diorama that showed how the nation of Israel had grown and spread and that kind of stuff, was just it's like it widened my lens and it made it possible to see Israel in a different way. Going through the Holocaust Museum and seeing the remnants of the lives of people that were violently taken for no other reason than evil, just plain evil, human evil, was something that was powerful to me. To go and look and put my hand on the glass where Schindler's List was, and to go down Schindler's List and actually see, this is not just a movie, this is real, this really happened, these were real people, these are people that made a difference to help to keep it from happening, or to make those last moments and those last days as bearable as possible in such a horrific time period. Just made the expanse of my life grow in ways that were very different. So as a child, I got to go into the Dome of the Rock. So it's called the what? What is the proper name for the Dome of the Rock? Yeah, the
Dome of the Rock. That's what it's called.
Okay. All right, very good. I want to make sure I got that name correct, because I know culturally it's different face to face. This time I didn't get to go. But now I understood why I didn't get to go. I understood because of the cultural forces that fought over that piece in that place now prevented me from being able to go there. So I saw it, but didn't get a chance to go in there, right? Not only that, but as I think about going to the place where the Valley of Efrat is, right? Or the Valley of Elah, excuse me. We went by Efrat, by your home, by Bethlehem, being stopped by the side of the road by soldiers that are protecting the well-being of people. It made me think that thousands of years ago, and even throughout the thousands of years, there probably always been soldiers preparing to take care of the power structure, whatever they happen to be, and whoever they happen to be from, whether they were Palestinian, Israeli, British, whatever. Israel has always been fought for, and it's still being fought for. Right?
It's really meaningful for me to hear you say all of it, because a lot of what you're saying is new to me. We haven't had this conversation, and you're just underscoring that we delivered, that this is an amazing experience, and more than just one of these, and I don't dismiss any trip, people should come here, but more than just a regular pastor's trip where you get off a bus and on a bus and off a bus and do that all day long. This was hands-on, and you could keep talking for another half hour or more about these experiences. I'm sure of it.
Absolutely.
I'm sure of it. But I hope.
Particularly, let me make a quick point about,
Yeah.
I've always heard that students or people that have to grow up, whether you're a woman or a man, have to serve in the Israeli army. But I have a picture of me with this huge selfie where soldiers are behind me with AKs, and there's more women than there are men.
Right.
I'm like, this country takes defense very seriously.
Right.
Because they have to.
Right. And not just taking the defense seriously, but as one of the projects that we fund to provide support for the soldiers, just to say, thank you. We love you. We appreciate you. You know me now that as I'm the father of a paratrooper here, it's right. It's even more powerful. So it's very common in America for people to walk around and see people in uniform and say, thank you for your service. But here, I mean, we'd be doing it all day, and there are kids, there are neighbors, and there are our kids' friends. And you got to experience that with that really warm briefing that we had. And since then, we're still doing that. We're still connecting and thanking them and blessing them. So that's really amazing. Let's run back, if we will, to the run itself. You mentioned how you like starting, and you mentioned how you like finishing, but you had 26 miles through Jerusalem. First of all, how did that race compare to other, you're an experienced runner? How did that compare to other races? And then what were you thinking about for those 5 hours or so?
So I've run some marathons around America. I've run the Shaw Observer Marathon. I've run the Medtronic Marathon up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, which is called the most beautiful urban marathon in America. And it probably is. It was just really beautiful experience. Each one of them is a time for reflection, but what made the Jerusalem Marathon even more particularly attractive, is a great experience, is that it was such a diverse group of people from all over the world and on every continent. From the time I finished the race until the time the race was actually over and the last person crossed the finish line, I stopped to cheer for those that were still running. There were people from every continent. There are people from Asia. There are people from Africa. There are people from Europe. There are people from North America, people from South America. It was almost like the melting pot of the world came back to the place where the world began.
Wow.
The way from my perspective was. So that was very meaningful. The second part of it was just to be setting down my feet on places that are so holy and sacred to people of all kinds of different religious faiths. So for Christians, for Jews, for Islamic people, for people that are people that are not of faith. I mean, they're the biggest growing population of people relative in America, and I think in Israel, is people that don't identify with any faith, right? They call them the nuns.
Oh,
but
yes.
To be in that place where we've assigned, not N-U-N-S like with a habit, but not N-O-N-E-S, that they don't listen to anything at all. But to be in that place, to know that I was running shoulder to shoulder and side to side with people that may have shared with my faith view, others that shared from a different worldview, but we're all doing a common experience in a place that is arguably and probably indisputably the home to the more of people that are representing the world's religions than any other.
The world's religions, and I would even take it a step further, arguably one of the most significant places in history. Obviously, certainly that's not in Minneapolis, but even if you go to New York, London, Tokyo, Athens, I mean, where are the other big marathons? Boston, of course. I mean, and they're beautiful, significant cities, but for good and sometimes for bad, Jerusalem is a lightning rod for everything.
It is, and there's a reason it's a lightning rod. I mean, there is this dimension that God in His sovereignty placed His hand on that city and the nation of Israel, and all of the things that have been fought for over the centuries have been as a result of His decision to place His sovereignty in the nation of Israel. And then so much has come from the Judeo-Christian tradition, and even Islam, even Zoroastrianism in a certain kind of way relate back to a monotheistic God.
Correct.
Okay, so we all share those things in common. It's interesting. I just did a wedding this year for a couple that they're the father of the bride, father and mother of the groom rather, were Zoroastrians. So,
Interesting.
and Zoroastrians are probably, in my case, my view, the Magi who came to see Jesus.
Wow.
I think that's who that was. So for me, it's a chance to piece together history in ways that are very meaningful. I don't know if you've seen it, but I would recommend it to your viewers and those that watch. There's a great thing that CNN did on Jerusalem that was or in Israel, Jerusalem particularly, though, that's multi-generational. It was over thousands of years. And actually there's 5 or 6 episodes. But every time I get this feeling of there's something unique emanating from this city of Jerusalem. And so to be a part of it and to be there was extraordinary. Then the other thing about it, just from a runner standpoint and from an athlete standpoint, it was tough. It was a tough test, because I tell people, some places you run and you're in flat places. Like you can run the Berlin Marathon. It's the flattest marathon in the world. You can run in New York and you go up and down through the boroughs and stuff like that. But you can run the Pikes Peak Marathon and it's straight uphill and, then straight down. But anyway, Jerusalem's teeth. It's teeth. I mean, there's hills all the way through it.
Correct.
And they're beautiful tests, but with every hill was a major challenge. Climbing up the hill to Hebrew University, climbing up the hill into the old city.
But wait, the hill to Hebrew University is also the hill to the Mount of Olives. So which is so central biblically.
Right. And just having to, take care of managing your body and what your body has to do to endure. I mean, to me, it was a microcosm of suffering. So a friend of mine just recommended a book to me recently called Chosen Suffering. I've not listened to it yet, but the way that I viewed my experience of those 5 hours. So if you're a runner out there and you can run faster than 5 hours, you need to come to Jerusalem. You need to run the Run for Zion. You need to set the next record. All right. Because mine's not going to stand but one time. So I'm glad COVID happened in this sense so I could hold the record for a couple of years. But that's the selfish part of me. But more importantly, for me, it was a metaphor of suffering for the people of God for a period of 5 hours so that all generations might be blessed through the little bit that I did and the little bit of money that I was able to bring back. I think we ended up raising about $12,000 or $13,000, something like that for these different projects. But to see them, to suffer through a lot of the steps in the marathon, to me was kind of like, this is a hard day and you're going through a hard thing, but nobody's marching you in to get a shower. That's not a shower.
Well, you just raised another interesting point, talking about being in Jerusalem and suffering. That's obviously got to relate to Jesus, no? When you're running through Jerusalem and you just say, we don't know, there's conflicting perspectives based on where your tradition is, where Jesus was actually buried after he was crucified, and maybe even where he was crucified. And some people feel that he was that they identified the place where he was held before going to the Roman governor. Or I don't know the exact sequence of that. But as a Christian, you can't be running through Jerusalem without thinking about Jesus and his suffering. What was that like?
Oh, very much so. So plus just there's the Tower of David. Yeah, David was actually there. Running through the streets, David set his foot on these cobblestones like Jesus did. Tying together that whole biblical narrative and understanding. I always tell people that, and obviously different terms of faith, the Old Testament is like a giant arrow that points toward fulfillment in the new for a Christ follower.
Interesting. So
you even mentioned, this thought occurred to me a few minutes ago when you mentioned Genesis 12:3 about those that bless Israel will be blessed themselves. Is this Sunday I'm preaching about one of what we call, as Christ followers, the Beatitudes. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. So there's that reciprocal thing that God gives to us. When we're merciful, he gives us mercy in return. And we don't give mercy just to get mercy, but that's the way God works. When we bless Israel, we are blessed because that's what God said he was going to bless.
That's correct.
You can argue with it. You can fight with it. You can torture me. You can waterboard me. You can do whatever. but I was blessed because I was there, and Genesis 12:3 came to life, just like Matthew chapter 5, verses
Right.
1 through 12 comes to life, about the nature of God and how he wants us to be as part of his kingdom people.
Right. So, okay. So, I mean, this is all amazing. We can go on for hours, and I guess we'll just leave it at that, on that point, for people to have to come here and experience that themselves. However, as you mentioned, because of the pandemic, last year, 2020, the marathon, 10 days before we were supposed to, when you came, we were a minivan full, and I was your guide and driver. And that was a lot of fun.
It was.
It was an amazing week. And the following year, we had 2 buses of people lined up, ready to go. And 10 days before the marathon was canceled, and then and a week, which is a week before people were supposed to have been arriving, and we were trying to figure out, well, what could we do instead of? And then just everything unraveled, and we were unable to have Run for Zion in person in 2020. And I'm not really, and now 2021 is nearly over, but there is a marathon plan for 2020, but because of the situation
2022,
now,
you mean?
22, sorry,
yeah.
22, but because of the situation now, we don't know that we're going to be able to really bring a lot of people, and we won't know that until probably just several weeks or less before the marathon. So people can certainly check out runforzion.com and visit, but now we lost all of last year. And this year, right? This year we're doing our planning for next year. And because we're not able to do something in person, we're pivoting to make it a virtual marathon experience. Now, I'm not a runner, so I don't know about that a lot, but I understand that virtual running is very common, but it's mostly you sign up, you use your app, you run, you use your app to demonstrate that you actually ran whatever you signed up for, and they send you a medal and a shirt and a something else. But it's not really interactive, as I'm understanding. And what we're planning, you and I spoke about this last week, because we got to put meat on the bones of this, what we're calling it the Run for Zion Virtual Jerusalem Experience, with the operative word being experience. We want to connect people to that. It's not the same. And I'm in a little bit, I want to ask you about telling people what you would tell people who would consider or being interested in coming here in person. But why did you, when we spoke about it, not everyone's loving the virtual idea. Why is that something that you actually got behind?
Well, because it's something I can do right now. So when the pandemic began, I began with this mantra and the people that I lead in various different places in my life. Control what you can control and leave the rest to God. And the truth is, relative to the pandemic, I wish everybody would be honest, from public health officials, politicians, scientists, everybody. Here's what we have done. We've made it up as we gone along. That's really what's happened. Right. Based on the best information available. And then everybody argues about the information, but we've made it up while we go along. So optimally, it'd be great if the nation of Israel would, from a runner standpoint, throw open the windows and say by December 1st, hey, we're going to have it. You guys need to come. That's awesome.
That would
be awesome. I would just say, for those 80 people, if you're out there listening to this podcast a couple of years later or a year and a half after you wanted to have run this race, then keep your mind open to that.
Yes.
But if we can't, or if you have family members or conditions in your family that you believe that will put you too much at risk to do that, so how do you make a difference right now? What I would suggest is that you plan your own Jerusalem marathon that you would do in a place that's like Jerusalem. So I'm actually going to send Jonathan a picture, or he can find it online, of just the way the Jerusalem marathon looks. It's like a bunch of teeth and a bunch of hills and then a few flats here and there. What if you planned your own Jerusalem marathon? Maybe you're not a person that runs 26 miles or even 13 or a half marathon or even a 10K, but you are a runner. What if over the span of a couple of weeks, you could run a course similar to the Jerusalem marathon, where you're putting some hills in it, some things that are very similar to it, and you can, while you are running, to pray for Israel, to pray for the people of God, to pray for Christians and Jews, and even people that are the outsiders, other faiths, because God always even leaves room for the marginalized, even in his kingdom, right?
Right.
God does love everyone. God is love, and everything else. But I would think that could be a great way to do it. Another way to do it is to map out a course that looks something like Jerusalem, or fly to somewhere in America that looks like something like Jerusalem. Maybe get a Run for Zion t-shirt that you make up on your own with your local t-shirt provider, or singlet, and say, here's what I'm about. Maybe you tell people in your church or your church community that this is something I care about. Well, we need to help Israel now. There are things that Israel needs help with now, not just when I can run this race. Can we make donations to the Genesis 123 Foundation? What if you just did 13 training runs of 2 miles?
Yes.
And you let people know that I'm doing this for the next couple of weeks. And when you make this a virtual fundraiser for Genesis 123 Foundation, and I'll leave it to you to explain all the good that you've done, or we have been able to do with Run for Zion and Genesis 123, to explain to people, this is not John. I've been by Jonathan's house. He does not live in the mansion. He does not drive a Ferrari. This is not one of those kinds of places. As a matter of fact, Jonathan and the whole team at Run for Zion, of mostly volunteers, have put their life and their livelihoods at risk, and subsistence is more in line with, instead of success. But for you, your heart and your mind and our mind of those that are part of your board of advisors is on this, and we know that it's a catalyst to be able to do things. In the meantime, too, you can also tune in to this podcast that comes out regularly, because the way that I look at this podcast and what you're doing, Jonathan, with all these great people that you've had on the last year, is that you've let us kind of be a Jerusalem insider or an Israel insider, and understanding not even just all the easy things. You've talked about why it took 2 years to elect a prime minister, and taken us through the elections and the political wrangling that's gone on and all the things that have happened. I really feel like I'm a better informed citizen of the world just by tuning into the things that are published by the Genesis 123 Foundation. Wow. Whether it's an email or a video or a podcast or a one-on-one conversation with you, I always feel like I know more about a place that is unique in God's heart, that is the catalyst for the rest of civilization.
Beautiful. That's super meaningful, because I mean, you've said things like this to me before, but you said that with such clarity, and I'm grateful for you acknowledging all of that, but of the people hearing it, it means a lot. The other thing, by the way, talking about it, and it's a great testimony as far as what we've been doing, because the commitment for the virtual experience is to do even more. So for you as the runner, but every person who sponsors you for 10 or 25 or 50 or $100, we're going to give private access to some great content, so you're connected to Jerusalem in your time. There is a little bit of virtual saturation, I think, and it would be too much if I said, okay, Pastor Ray, you have to tune in at 3 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday, because that's when I'm giving you the content. And that's also because that's 10 p.m. here in Israel, and I don't really feel like being awake at 3 a.m. my time. But we're going to be giving that content so it's accessible if you're free on Tuesday at 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. or right. Sunday after you come home from church. And we really, that's why I said we really are going to be optimizing to the best of our ability the experience. And until that point, that people can come back here in person, and hopefully that will be by 2023, but we're all in this long enough to know that as we talk at the end of 2021, only God knows what's going to be at the end, beginning of 2023. But we'll pray for that. We'll pray for that. And the other point that I just wanted to underscore that you said, that you said it really well, but people can do something now. Just because we're not able to connect people here physically in person shouldn't mean that we put off having a meaningful connection and blessing Israel for another year. So yes, we do want to invite people to connect with us, to sign up for the virtual. And you and Elizabeth were two of the full marathon runners, and Pat and Angie ran the half, and a couple of people ran the 10, and Christy, who was not a runner, walked 5K and had her own amazing experience. What did you see through that? Like you talked about running with this great diversity of people, but and Linda and I sat on the sidelines, right? We were waiting. We were.
No, you're our cheerleaders, man. You were our cheerleaders. You had a role too. That was good.
But I'm saying that's important. Why? So someone who's listening now who says, well, that's funny. I'm not a runner. I never would dream of running 26 miles, much less 5 kilometers. It's not my thing. Or someone who would walk or run 5 or 10 kilometers. What would you say to them?
I would say, when you're a child, you crawl before you walk before you run. So why not be part of it? Everybody needs to walk. If you can walk, if God's given you the ability to still do that. If you're in a wheelchair, what if you said over a span of time, I'm going to go do 26 miles around the track or up and down my street or whatever. You can kind of create this as you go along. The other thing that I think is fascinating about this is you're going to get a cool t-shirt, you're going to get a cool medal and that kind of stuff. But the content that we're going to unlock to you is going to help you to be a better citizen of the world. And it's not going to be framed through a lens, but it's going to be framed through a Zionist lens. It's not going to come from CNN or NBC or CBS or Fox News or something like that. We want to give you the inside information about government, culture, politics, interactions between the nations of the world, the various kind of things, athletics. You've had Olympic athletes that have been on here that have blessed me. I mean, I'm sitting here praying in and with and for Olympic athletes that are the top practitioners in judo and running and various things like that. I remember that particular podcast, but we want to give you that inside information that it is worth the time and effort. And, it's just like anything else in life. If you got goals, you need to set little sub goals, and you make those little sub goals reach a larger goal. So what if you could use your feet and move your feet to make a difference in the lives of people? And even if you do it virtually, maybe you're praying for Israel while you're doing your 2-mile thing 13 times, or 1 mile 26 times, or half a mile 52 times.
Correct.
Or you're just doing a 5K. I mean, that's the other great thing about it. In the future, I know we'll talk about this later, when it's possible for people to come to Israel. If you're a 5K runner, come run the 5K. It's the same day. Come run the 10K. It's the same day.
Correct.
Come run the half marathon. It's the same day. If you don't like to run, walk around the old city of Jerusalem and pray for those that are going to be running various distances while you're here. And call people up and say, man, this is something worth giving your money to, and your time and your talents to. And there's a role for everybody. I guess the first thing I would just say to people is that the first thing Billy Graham, if you're an evangelical, would do before he would come to a city is he'd say, we're going to pray about going there. One of the things I want to circle back to the day that you met me in our facility. On that day, we had the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association recording the other side of the building.
That's right.
Kind of some follow-up classes to what they call their crusade. Used to call crusades, now they call festivals that they do. And this was particularly used in Australia about 6 months after the day that you and I met there. So, I mean, to me, it was great. I was touching the story of my faith now in one side of the building, and interacting, high-fiving, fist bumping with my brother who's from Israel, the first part of our faith at the same time. It's a microcosm in the building at the same time. But I would just say the first, would you pray for Jonathan? Would you pray for Genesis 1-2-3 Foundation? Would you pray for Run for Zion? Would you just all do that? Everybody that's listening to the sound of my voice right now, pray a prayer out loud, in person, from your silent thoughts to God, from your heart, to say, well, how should I get involved? And just say, that's the question, God. I'm praying about this thing. How do you want me to be involved? Some of you out there want to run and raise money. Some of you just want to run and honor Israel by running and this kind of stuff. And you can make it a cultural experience. Some of you don't want to, can't run or walk or don't want to or whatever, but you have lots of generous money. You can do something with that. And those dollars are going somewhere, to something that, even if I buy the very best Ferrari, it's going to wear out. And it's going to be something is going to ultimately not bring me eternal happiness. I love to think about it this way. You can't take stuff with you, but you can send it on ahead. There's a kingdom from heaven that has come down to earth. God has a plan. And when you're doing something for the people that God and the nation that God asked us to bless, that requires us to bless, if we want to be blessed ourselves, you're going to be blessed in return. I just really feel like everybody can pray about how to get involved at whatever level. Maybe it's just praying that you'll become part of the regular contributors to Genesis 1-2-3 Foundation, because you can give $10 a month or $20 a month or $1 a month or whatever. Others of you can stroke a check for $50 or $60 or $70,000. Others, you can't do that, but however, you can be part of this experience, and you can contribute to whatever level that you possibly have. And only out there, but to pray that simple prayer, how can I be involved in Genesis 1-2-3? How can I be involved in Run for Zion? And then just paying attention to what God has to say to you in your prayers.
Thank you for that. That I'm going to ask you if there's anything else you wanted to say, but that's almost a perfect place to sum this up. But I have to interject here because you know about this about me personally, and it's the MO that through which everything that I'm doing is touched, is that you're talking about giving money, and that's one very important and good way to bless Israel. But one of the things that's so important to me about the Genesis 1-2-3 Foundation is we're not just another one of those nonprofits that's always out there only asking for money. I refer to this as the objectification of Christians as a faith-based ATM. We're not doing that. Sure, we're asking for money, and we're giving opportunities for people to give to meaningful, hands-on things that are real and have integrity. But we're building relationships, and those are no less important. That's about the stuff that you can take with you and pass on as a legacy. That Ferrari is going to run out, and I want to just point out, I haven't thought about this in many, many years.
By the way, I was going to show you. I've already got my Ferrari. Somebody gave me one.
You got your Ferrari in the box.
Somebody gave me a Ferrari. I already got mine.
Very nice. I don't, but my 16-year-old son would love to have one. Maybe I'll have to find out where you got yours. Awesome. The smallest donation I ever received for any project I ever worked on in my career was there in North Carolina, not in your community. I was in a church one day, and a woman came up to me, literally with tears streaming out of her eyes, and she handed me a penny. And she said, "This is all I can afford." Now, I want you to know, I was traveling, doing my 2-3 week trips throughout the US. I was afraid I would lose the penny. So I taped it to a piece of paper, and I put it in an envelope and addressed it to my office. And I put a stamp on it. Stamps running 50, 55 cents. I spent more money on the stamp than I did for her donation, but it was so important for me to receive that donation with her tears in her eyes, because that was about relationship, and that's what we're doing, and that's what we're doing.
I would just say in response to that, so I'm like everybody else out there. I understand when you have some kind of philanthropic thing that you can be a part of, you have to kind of run it through your filter of, is this legit? Is this whatever? And is this just another way to raise money? Well, I mean, total transparency. When I first saw this, I was going like, yeah, this is about that. But then I met Jonathan. I took the time to sit down and listen to what you had to say. And then I began to think to myself, this is something that God is calling me to. I can't give to everything, just like those of you that are watching or listening, you can't give back to everything either. Even if you could, you probably shouldn't.
Correct.
You got to decide what it is that you want to give to. And I mean, I want to follow God's law, but not just because it's the law. I don't want to just be blessed to get blessed. I wanted to bless to be a blessing.
Correct.
To people. That's the greatest blessing in life to me, is blessing other people. and adding value to people's lives, because I want to make a difference with people who want to make a difference, doing something that makes a difference at a time that makes a difference. Here's what I can promise you, based upon everything I have seen through this experience and on the inside as a board of advisors person in the Genesis 1-2-3 Foundation, the Run for Zion, is that this is legit. This is a great way to help. You're going to have value added to your life in all kinds of ways that you can't even begin to count right now. And I advise you to do so. I'm excited about those days just from a practical standpoint, because Jonathan's plan, if I remember correctly, in the long run, is there's a Galilee half marathon and there's a Dead Sea half marathon. And you want to make it possible, Tel Aviv marathon, that people could go and experience as well, because that's another part of Israel. And it's another part of that place that is so unique in all of history. And so for those of you that are like me, that are like, man, I can't wait to jump in the car to go run in this race, I would just say to some of you out there are cowboys like me. You might find out a month and a half before the Jerusalem Marathon that you can jump on a plane and your passport's up to date and all that kind of stuff. And you've had your shots and your vaccinations and all that kind of stuff, and you want to go do this. So why don't you be prepared to do that? There's some people out there that I know that have resources of time and wealth and that kind of stuff to do that. If you're listening to this, maybe you'll be ready to be one of those people to jump on the plane and go bless Israel in this way.
If we can do that, that'll be amazing. And if we can't, then we're still going to be doing virtual, and we're going to be praying along with everyone else by 2023 that this virtual is going to be the funnel for getting back on track to where we were 2 buses and have 3 buses and 5 buses. And eventually, and I thought you were going to say this a moment ago, eventually Run for Zion is going to be the biggest element of bringing tourists to the Jerusalem Marathon, and then all the other events that you mentioned.
I resonate with that. Absolutely.
Pastor Ray, this has been amazing. So first of all, it's always a pleasure. You know, for me, we're just having a great conversation about stuff that's important to us. But we're inviting a lot of other people to listen and share this with others. Before we really wrap up, anything else that you want to add about Run for Zion, Israel, Genesis 1-2-3, that people need to hear, a word that people need to hear now?
Well, I would just say be open to your involvement at whatever level in this experience. By asking God how you need to be involved, He might say to you that He does want you to be involved. That's a possibility. I don't think so. I think God's put your mind on this podcast and on this organization so that you can certainly be praying, if nothing else, which is, prayer moves mountains. We believe that. But the other thing I would say is that the relationships that I established along the way with my friends that are life runners from Runners for Life, and with the various other people we met, Elizabeth Long and other people that are involved in the life of running, and then also the life of the nation of Israel, and they care. It's just a very powerful experience. And here's the deal. You got to spend your life doing something. Why not invest in doing it something that matters eternally, for what God says eternally matters, His nation and His people.
Amen. I don't think we can end on anything stronger than that. Thank you. Pastor Ray Hardee in Belmont, North Carolina, veteran Jerusalem Marathon Run for Zion participant, and God willing, soon to be future. And maybe you'll hold that record a little bit longer. Who knows? Maybe you'll best yourself.
I tell you what, the thing that I want to have, I want people to blow it away.
Dozens.
I want them to be blown away by their experience in helping the nation of Israel.
Right. We still remember Babe Ruth, even though Hank Aaron has a few more home runs. All right. Let me just wrap up. There are a lot of people, in addition to Pastor Ray and everyone who's helped make Run for Zion the success that it is and will be again, but there are a lot of people behind this podcast, Inspiration from Zion. And I want to acknowledge, first of all, that we're sponsored in part by our friends at the Willow Run Greenhouse in Culpeper, Virginia, and they're amazing. If I want to say to anyone, if you're anywhere near Culpeper, Virginia, and you need anything that they have at a greenhouse, go and get it from them. And if you don't need anything from a greenhouse, just go and give them a hug and thank them for helping to make this podcast possible. And also our good friends, the Coin family. for their meaningful sponsorship. I just want to reiterate, Inspiration from Zion and all of the Genesis 123 Foundation programs are made possible by donations. So please do consider joining us to help continue the dialogue and build bridges. If you'd like to sponsor a future episode in honor or memory of a loved one or a special occasion, please do be in touch with me at inspirationfromzion@gmail.com or at our website, genesis123.co. We really do want to make this interactive. We love to hear your comments as part of a dialogue. Invite you to send questions as well that you have about anything relating to Judaism, Israel, especially for our Ask the Rabbi segment that we do every month. And mostly, wherever you're listening, I just want to send my blessings from Jerusalem that you and all of your loved ones continue to remain safe and healthy and blessed. God bless you all.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.